Back to Crossroads. One of the largest money laundering cases ever prosecuted in U.S. history involved elites using Swiss offshore banking. Yet even in that case, there may have been special interest where U.S. officials shielded many elites from prosecution. Stay tuned for more. A Chinese energy company and its U.S. affiliate have been indicted by the Department of Justice on charges of technology theft. I'll have more on this. With the U.S. elections, there's an ongoing back and forth about how mail-in ballots should be treated. We'll also be looking into this. And in one of the biggest money laundering cases in American history, whistleblower Bradley Birkenfield believes that the U.S. government may have still covered up key parts of his case. We'll be speaking with him on this, so stick around. And also, folks, before we jump into today's news, if you want to support our journalism, please consider subscribing to the Epoch Times in print or online. We really appreciate your support. First off, a Chinese energy company, its U.S. affiliate, and the general manager of the U.S. affiliate, who's a Chinese national, have been indicted by the Department of Justice on charges relating to the alleged theft of technology from a Houston area manufacturer. Prosecutors with the Department of Justice, they allege that Jason Energy Technologies, its U.S. affiliate, which is called Jason Oil and Gas Equipment, and also a Chinese national, Gao Lei, which is the U.S. affiliate's general manager, conspired to steal coiled tubing technology from a U.S. competitor with the help of an individual named Robert Erford Jr., who worked for the targeted U.S. company. Now, the two entities and Gao were charged with conspiracy, theft of trade secrets, and attempted theft of trade secrets. And Gao previously lived in Houston, and he's believed to be at large in China, according to the DOJ at least. And why were they looking to steal coiled tubing? It's because coiled tubing is used for maintenance of underground oil and gas pipes, and the U.S. company they targeted is an industry leader in producing these types of technology, according to the papers. In addition to this, the State Department has designated the Chinese Communist Party organization operating in the United States as a foreign mission of the CCP, basically meaning it's a branch of the Chinese government. It also terminated a 2011 agreement done under the Obama administration with Beijing to hold a collaboration summit between governors in both nations. Now, the National Association for China's Peaceful Unification, an organization controlled by China's United Front Work Department, was slapped with the designation on October 28th, which means it will now be treated as a foreign embassy or diplomatic mission and be required to register its staff rosters and U.S. properties with the State Department. The association was being used by the United Front Work Department to, quote, advance the PRC, that's the People's Republic of China, propaganda and malign influence. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this in a statement. And once again, what do we see? The United Front is coming to the forefront. This is again the Chinese Communist Party's main branch working on U.S. soil to subvert the United States. Its focus is to get the elite of each country, the U.S., Canada, Australia, the U.K., you name it, to work on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. They give them various forms of interest, whether it be business deals, money, whether it be power, influence, you name it, whether it be sex traps. They get them involved in these scandals, blackmail them, or control them through influence, and get them to act on the Chinese Communist Party's behalf while serving in their normal roles in the U.S. or other countries. This includes, for example, politicians, it includes business leaders, it includes academics, it includes journalists. Anybody who can have influence in the society is a target of these operations. And here again we see the United States going after it, not technically banning it, but making it so this United Front Work organization, this front operation, is designated as a foreign mission, and that every entity it has and every staff member it has is designated as such as well. Now, meanwhile, with the U.S. elections, there's an ongoing back and forth about how mail-in ballots should be treated. Now, Democrats in some states have pushed to extend the deadline for accepting mail-in ballots and to count the ballots even if the signatures don't match. Republicans have mainly pushed to maintain existing standards on deadlines and discernment for potential fraud. Now, in Minnesota, the Trump campaign and Republican candidates for the local state legislature have requested the Minnesota Supreme Court to separate all mailed-in ballots that are received after Election Day, in case there are legal challenges over the validity of these ballots. They filed a petition on October 28th saying the move may be necessary since, quote, it could be impossible for a court to repair the election results tainted by illegally and untimely cast or mailed ballots if the ballots are not segregated or kept separately. They're also claiming that the Minnesota Secretary of State, quote, unilaterally and without legal authority usurped the Minnesota legislature and Congress's power to establish rules regulating the manner and time of federal elections by deciding that he will not enforce Minnesota's mail-in ballot deadlines. Now, in response to this, Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simons, a Democrat, said in a statement he is, quote, committed to protecting and strengthening the security and fairness of our election process. And on a related note, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a California Democrat, is now urging voters to vote in person and to avoid using vote by mail. She announced a change in her position during a news conference without elaborating. She also stated that, quote, even the Postal Service is saying it's too late now to mail a first-class piece of mail, to take more than 5 or 6 days to reach its destination. It just speaks for itself. In other news, the CEOs of Twitter, Facebook, and Google were questioned by U.S. senators in an October 28th hearing of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, which was looking into whether Section 230 protections are allowing big tech to engage in ill behavior, including political censorship. The opinions were split mainly along partisan lines, with many Republicans accusing the companies of interfering in the November elections mainly through censorship, and with many Democrats arguing the hearing itself was politically motivated. During the hearing, the CEOs requested to have alternatives rather than losing their Section 230 protections. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey claimed that doing so will, quote, remove free speech from the internet. Sundar Pichai, CEO of Alphabet Inc., which owns Google and YouTube, said the internet has been a powerful force for good, but also said the ability for people to freely share information carries risk of abuse. And Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, said an alternative to losing legal protections would be to make the content moderation systems more transparent and to, quote, separate good actors from bad actors. Now, this follows an executive order from President Trump to end tech censorship by potentially stripping big tech firms of their protections under Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act. This makes them not legally liable for what people post on the platforms. A July 29 statement from the White House noted that the Department of Commerce was already looking into the scope of Section 230 and was asking for clarification that, quote, Section 230 does not permit social media organizations that alter or editorialize users' speech to escape civil liability. It states as well, quote, President Trump will continue to fight back against unfair, un-American, and politically biased censorship of Americans online. Now, meanwhile, it has now been revealed that the author of a book and article promoted by the New York Times called Anonymous, which was written by an anonymous White House staffer critical of the Trump administration, has now revealed his identity on October 28th. The author is Miles Taylor, who now works as a CNN contributor. Taylor was Chief of Staff of the Department of Homeland Security under former Secretary John Kelly. Although the New York Times article painted the picture that Taylor was a higher-level official in the White House. Taylor wrote in the September 28th article, quote, I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration. The White House press secretary's office responded on October 28th, saying Taylor is a, quote, liar and coward who chose anonymity over action and leaking over leading. The statement says that Taylor was fired after only a few weeks in his role due to being, quote, ineffective and incompetent. And it notes as well that, quote, it is appalling that a low-ranking official would be granted anonymity, and it is clear that the New York Times is doing the bidding of never-Trumpers and Democrats. Now, what are we saying here, folks? This looks like another case of media hiding sources and details in order to make a story appear to be larger than it actually is. Of course, this individual is entitled to his own opinions. He's entitled to make statements even against the president, especially he's no longer in his position. But again, the problem here that's being pointed out is that media were misrepresenting his authority. They were misrepresenting his level of access and misrepresenting the nature of these claims as being something a lot bigger than it actually was. Now also, for some news on the U.S. elections, videos from undercover journalism nonprofit Project Veritas show a former congressional campaign volunteer in Texas saying she can deliver thousands of votes for tens of thousands of dollars. She suggested she's done this before and claims she has influence with officials in Texas who owe her favors. The woman in the video says, quote, "This is what you call flipping people," and added she could go to jail for her actions. In another video, the woman, Raquel Rodriguez, was filmed detailing the cost of her services.
For the entire team that I'm looking at $55,000.
So $55,000 for 5,000 votes, confident, eager, Biden.
That's right. Cash.
Also, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said in a recent interview with CNN that she'll be one of the Electoral College electors in New York State. Clinton said, quote, "I'm an elector in New York," and added, quote, "I'm sure I'll get to vote for Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris in New York, so that's pretty exciting." In South Carolina, meanwhile, a federal judge ruled that election officials cannot reject mail-in ballots if the signatures don't match. The ruling was made on October 27th by District Judge Richard Gergel, who was appointed by former President Barack Obama. And in Louisville, Kentucky, a former U.S. Postal Service employee is facing 5 years in prison under a federal charge for delay or destruction of mail for allegedly discarding mail that included close to 100 absentee ballots. The Swiss banking system has a reputation of being used for tax evasion, money laundering, and other nefarious activities. And Bradley Birkenfeld, one of the biggest whistleblowers in U.S. history, exposed the UBS, which is the world's largest bank, and now it helped the ultra-wealthy commit tax fraud through offshore banking. Bradley Birkenfeld details this in his book, Lucifer's Banker Uncensored, and shows how he helped the United States recover over $5 billion from that system. He also details what he believes was a special interest cover-up at the hands of the Obama administration and also key U.S. officials. To learn more about this, we've invited Bradley Birkenfeld to come speak with us. Now, folks, the reason we can get interviews like this and the reason we can break stories like this is because of the standards at the Epoch Times and its mission to revive what journalism used to be. If you want to support our mission of truth and tradition, please consider subscribing to the Epoch Times. Now let's jump into the interview with Bradley Birkenfeld. Bradley Birkenfeld, it's great having you on Crossroads.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure.
Now, of course, you were deep in this system at one point before you came out as a whistleblower. What a lot of people may not realize is there's the legitimate economies. There's multi-billion-dollar companies, but there's also an illegitimate global economy as well. Billions, hundreds of billions, in your case, trillions of dollars used in an underworld economy, essentially. And really, becoming a whistleblower in that's probably one of the most dangerous things you could possibly deal with. The more money involved, the bigger the crimes, the bigger it gets. I guess first off, what was that like for you coming out and exposing this? And then I'm hoping as well you could tell us about what is it like in that kind of underbelly of this real elite type of crime?
Well, you have to understand, in Switzerland, offshore banking was legal. To not pay your taxes was part of their constitution, which is no longer part of it. Swiss bank secrecy is over. But you have to understand, those are their laws. Just like in London, you can go out in public and drink. Switzerland has these laws for hiding money. Okay, that's just the way it was. And that originates back from the Third Reich under Adolf Hitler, where they would kill any person who moved money outside the country in 1933 when they came to power. The reason for that was to keep the money in the country to build the war machine for World War II that was coming. Okay. Switzerland then came up with Swiss bank secrecy that said we will never disclose your identity to anyone, an individual, a court, a government, unless there's illegal actions. Tax evasion is not illegal under Swiss law, which has now since been changed thanks to me. So in this world of banking, what people have to understand, again, if they've never been to Switzerland, Switzerland is a country now of about 8 million people, give or take. That's literally from the elderly person from the newborn. And it's a clean country. It's a politically safe country, economically stable country. And there's a lot of money there, a lot of corporations and so forth. So in Geneva alone, there was 130 banks when I started my whistleblowing back in 2007. Today, there's about 75. So literally 55 banks have either merged or vanished. This is a cataclysmic change. But more importantly is that what it did was it provided a cover for the CIA to hide money, to pay informants. It also helped people hide money from business partners, from spouses, and of course the tax man. And as I said earlier, a lot of nefarious acts on top of that took place. Not with every client, but some did. For instance, insider trading, bribery, extortion, gun smuggling, drug running, and so on and so forth. So I think what I saw was this was a standard operating procedure where people brought large sums of money, some in cash, not just wire transfers, artwork, large yachts, chalets, and cars and jewelry and so forth. But what I've done since the last book came out, I was threatened by Kevin Costner, the Hollywood actor, and Leonard Lauder, the billionaire for Estee Lauder. I'm suing them now in state court in Florida because they had offshore accounts at UBS in Geneva, Switzerland. They have not once denied it, and they're going to be held accountable. That's why I put them in my new book, and that's why I've sued them in state court in Florida. So that just gives one example of your audience to understand, well, why do these rich people have to hide even more money not to pay tax? Well, you might want to ask Kevin Costner and Leonard Lauder that. Of course, the Attorney General in New York would like to go after President Trump's tax returns. But Leonard Lauder's a billionaire from New York, and he had an offshore account at UBS. Why don't they ask for his tax returns? It's a simple question, right? It's a fair question. But you see, this has been partisan because Hillary Clinton was put in charge of this investigation, and she covered it up. And why do I know it's a cover-up? If you go onto my website, lucifersbanker.com, under DOJ corruption, and in my book, Lucifer's Banker Uncensored, you'll see a WikiLeaks cable from Julian Assange. How do I know it's accurate? Because I met with Julian Assange twice at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And he actually handed me a copy of it as well. I had it before then, but he gave me another copy. And we discussed it at length. And in that one-page WikiLeaks cable, which nobody was supposed to see, clearly states between Hillary Clinton and her counterpart in Switzerland, there must be a political solution to the UBS case. That alone proves that Hillary Clinton cheated over 350 million Americans. That's a fact. I know it because they didn't find the bank properly. She didn't get all 19,000 names. She only got 4,700 names. And she let all the directors of the bank walk away, and the bank got a deferred prosecution agreement. But the one man who brought it to their attention, the whistleblower, is the one who went to jail.
Yeah, I know that was one of the big parts in that case originally, was that out of all the crimes that were exposed by you, you were the one who went to jail for it because you know, you were a whistleblower, of course, and you came out and exposed it. And one of the big arguments against putting you in jail at that time was, one, why are you going to jail, not all the people you just exposed? But two, what does it mean for whistleblowers in the future, where they come out and expose crimes and they're the ones who get thrown in jail for it? What's your response to that?
Well, that's exactly right. It's a chilling effect on whistleblowing in general. And I think anyone who ever thought about coming forward, whether they're married or they have children, they think twice about it because they're a little bit nervous, and rightly so. There might be intimidation, there might be harassment. These are basic qualities of a whistleblower that they have to confront. It's very, very, very dangerous, number one. But number two, it's an emotional stress. It's a financial stress. It's a social stress, and all of these things that come together. So by coming forward in eradicating waste, fraud, and corruption in our society, whistleblowers are in essence an extension of law enforcement. Law enforcement can't do everything, whether they're corrupt or they're under budgeted or understaffed. A whistleblower will deliver all the information so that they can pursue it properly. And I think that's exactly what you've seen time and time again with whistleblowers. And under the Obama administration, he's actually incarcerated more whistleblowers than all presidents combined. So you can see nobody likes to see the truth, but the problem is that he's really not being honest with the American people. He's going against what people want. They want transparency and accountability. And what Obama did with Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton was, in effect, cheat over 350 million Americans. Period. There's no discussion.
Well, on that too, I mean, I'm sure you kind of see a different world because you were watching these accounts. You know a lot of the individuals who were possibly putting money in these banks. Yeah, you saw how a lot of that money was possibly being used. And you seem to understand that a lot of this, based on your findings, a lot of it was, Hillary Clinton covering it up, as you said, Barack Obama putting whistleblowers behind bars, Hunter Biden being involved in some of this. You don't seem to be concerned about Trump, though, and I know when it comes to his tax returns, this is one of the big things people making noise about. Have you ever seen anything on him regarding this?
That I haven't, and to be fair, I only want to report on things I know. Now, tax returns are a very delicate subject. Why? Tax returns, I believe in his case, for instance, there was just some information that New York Times spilled out and so forth, which really goes against the grain of proper reporting. But anyways, I think what you have here with the president, his taxes, most people in his level of tax status, they prepay their taxes on a quarterly basis. This is common knowledge, because you have to prepay what your estimated tax would be. I do the same. I pay it quarterly. And people say, well, why would you do that? Well, because you have to. Under IRS rules, you have certain deductions and earnings and so forth. So at least you don't get to pay it all at the end. You have to pay it quarterly. So quite frankly, I don't know if the president had anything offshore per se, but I certainly do know that when I went to the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations to testify and give this information back in 2007, there was a Senator Obama who never attended those hearings. This is fact. But at the same time that he did not attend those hearings because he was running for president and he won in 2008, he then was accepting millions of dollars in campaign contributions from the chairman of UBS Americas, Robert Wolf. Now, anybody who's listening to this broadcast should say this is criminal. And Barack Obama knows what he did, and it's wrong. He totally failed in his obligation, his constitutional obligation to attend Senate hearings, in which he was an active member, the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee. But at the very same time, they're under criminal investigation. He's accepting money from them, from the chairman of UBS. Then he puts them, Robert Wolf, on two of his boards at the White House. He plays golf with Robert Wolf. This is outlandish. And then he appoints Hillary Clinton to investigate UBS, and she doesn't find them properly, cheating 350 million Americans. This was the quintessential crime of the century. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, of course, knew what they were doing, and they did it anyways to protect their constituents, period.
So just to recap that, because this is pretty big, actually. You're saying that Barack Obama, when he was a senator, was supposed to be part of the committee that was handling these UBS cases. He did not attend those meetings, instead was making deals apparently with the head of UBS, and when he became president, appeared to have brought him into the administration to some degree, while at the same time appointing Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, to then handle the case, which led off this individual to a pretty deep degree, and also really minimized the impact of the number of people who could have been impacted by it in terms of going after corruption. Is this accurate?
That's not only accurate, but I'll add to it. Not only was Hillary Clinton criminally complicit, why would the Secretary of State be involved in an international criminal investigation? That's your first question. The second question is, when there were 19,000 accounts that I handed over to the government, why did Hillary Clinton only settle for 4,700 accounts? That's a 75% failure rate. I'm sure if you fail 75% of the time, like anyone else listening to this, you're fired. But why was that? And who picked the 4,700 accounts? We still don't know. Was it UBS? Was it Hillary Clinton putting her hand in a fishbowl? What was the criteria? Were they Republicans? We don't know. But it's very clear that three of the people I just mentioned to you, two billionaires, Leonard Lauder, a billionaire, Jack Manning, a billionaire, and a Hollywood icon, Kevin Costner, were not indicted. And they had offshore accounts. Because I worked, Estee Lauder was my account holder, and I knew her son had an account with my boss. And I know Jack Manning because he was my account. And I worked on Kevin Costner's account at UBS. So this is where the American people should be furious that the Obama administration knowingly, actively covered up the largest tax scandal in U.S. history to protect their donors and the people that would support them after they leave office.
It's pretty big, geez. This is all included in your book as well, you said, right?
It certainly is. And if someone wants, and I'll say it again, if someone would like to sue me, you can find me in Malta, be my guest, but they won't sue me. Why? I'm telling the truth. The reason why I did the book, again, it's important for the people to understand, this is a story that must be told, because this is not only relevant to the politicians who are lying to us now, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, the fact is that the American taxpayer, the hardworking people of this country, Democrat and Republican, both sides, got cheated because they had an agenda to protect their pockets and their interests. So the few at the top get protected and the rest of the people get cheated. And that's exactly what happened. And if someone would like to debate me, I'll debate anyone, anywhere, at any time. No problem. I have the facts, I witnessed it, and I have documents to prove it.
This is interesting because I just did a big episode on policies of President Donald Trump and of Joe Biden. It's interesting that in Joe Biden's policies, he actually talks about going after money laundering. It's one of his main tax policies, actually. What's your perception of that? Because when I read that, I was like, oh, maybe he will go after people committing tax fraud. Do you think that's legitimate, or is there a loophole in this? What's your thought about it?
Well, again, I'm fairly well versed in this area, and I think that's a fraudulent statement by Joe Biden. And the reason for it is very simple. He's been in office for over 4 decades, and he comes from the state of Delaware. These are all facts. And the state of Delaware is a corporate tax haven. Now, Joe Biden has done nothing, repeat, nothing to curtail Delaware's illegal tax evasion policies. For instance, you can set up companies and bank accounts and so forth. The problem is, and don't take my word for it, go back to June 2012, New York Times article clearly states that it is a offshore tax haven, Delaware, with drug dealers, tax evaders, gun runners, gambling mobsters, and so forth. And it's clear as day. Delaware has been doing this for years, but that's Joe's state. And Joe gives this image that he's there for the little man. No, he's there for his own pocket and his family. He's done nothing to correct offshore tax evasion in Delaware. And furthermore, he's done nothing to do it because in the UBS case that I exposed, he and Barack Obama and Hillary were holding hands. They are part of the crime because they did not correct the crime, investigate the crime, they covered up the crime. That's illegal. And that's exactly what they did. As I said, you didn't find the bank properly. You didn't get all the names of the clients. You let all the directors of the bank walk away, and you let the bank itself get a deferred prosecution agreement. I mean, this is outlandish. And again, Democrats and Republicans all got cheated. All of them. Everyone in this country because of this action. Go look at the WikiLeaks cable on my website. It says it clear as day. It's a political solution to the case and the facts I just stated. So I think this is something where the American people should take notice and certainly be very upset because they got cheated. Yes.
Great. I guess just last question here. I mean, it's pretty explosive stuff. I guess if you were to leave our viewers with one last message, in terms of your work, in terms of what you just told us about the way these things work, I mean, a lot of this is a black box for most of us. For most people, the average voter, the idea of global tax fraud and global tax evasion and big corporations moving money and politicians being involved in it, we kind of know it happens. We know that UBS is set up that way. We know Delaware to an extent is set up that way. We know it happens, but the details of it, the picture of it, really grasping it is very difficult for a lot of us. What would you tell people? I guess just as a last point to get across, what do you hope they understand from all this?
Well, I would say just go look at my website first just to get an idea and just sort of educate yourself a bit to understand exactly what I'm saying is supported there on the website, and certainly my book. I'm not just saying to buy my book, but it's so you understand, you educate and inform. That's what I always tell people. And it's important because some of these are quite sophisticated. Offshore accounts, numbered accounts, safe deposit boxes, offshore companies and trusts and so forth. This is why it's done that way, with sophisticated lawyers and accountants and trustees and so forth. But the reason why it's done is because people with that much money try to get away with it. And in the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden instance that we've heard about from the other whistleblower, I know exactly what he's saying. It's clear as day what they were doing. So it's troubling because most people in this country, they're hardworking Americans, and they can't do the things that we just talked about here. But these folks at the highest levels of government not only rip off the system, violate their oath to the Constitution that they took when they came into office, and in the end, the rich rip off everyone else. And this is what happened here with the Obama administration.
Bradley Birkenfeld, it's been a real pleasure having you on Crossroads. Thanks again.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Now, with that said, folks, are broadcasting 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and also on Sundays, they do a live Q&A, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to support this channel, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You can find the link to that in the description below. And also, if you want to support the journalism of the Epoch Times, please consider subscribing to our online or print editions. Now, that said, please tune in next time, stay informed, and stay free.